had begun setting caps on how many could participate. And it became what was called the Philanthropic Roundtable, which was a convening of evaluation directors and senior administrators in philanthropic foundations from around the country. One of the original organizers and hosts was the Blank Foundation. Penny McPhee and John Baer there in Atlanta played a major role in the Philanthropic Roundtable, getting it started. And they would take on topics like how to do strategic evaluations of foundations, dealing with systems thinking, dealing with complexity. And they had their meeting actually in Minneapolis, where I'm located in St. Paul, Minneapolis, 2 years ago. And the theme was looking at how evaluation was changing and had changed. And so as a part of that, Tom Schwant did a presentation on post-normal evaluation. And I did a closing session that was different for this conference because in addition to inviting philanthropic evaluation directors to their meeting, they invited 50 evaluation consultants to foundations, a very diverse group of people, to have a special day on what it was like to consult with philanthropic foundations. And it was in that context that following Tom Schwant's presentation, I took the group through Bob Stake's article from 2004 on what he considered the criteria for evaluators who care about evaluation. What do we care about? And he identified 6 things that he thought evaluators cared about. And then I invited the group to go through a process first individually and then in small groups of updating that list. What do people care about now? And as the article shows, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, as it's come to be known and widespread in the philanthropic world, was very prominent. But what struck me was that there was not major attention, or really any attention, to issues of climate and sustainability. And therefore, I concluded the article by suggesting that social justice issues and environmental justice issues are tied together, and that we ought to view them as connected in that way. This comes out of the work I've been doing on what I call blue marble evaluation, which is looking at the ways in which the climate emergency is affecting all of us, and the pandemic has brought increased attention to the urgency of being able to operate and deal globally with global issues. And in the Blue Marble evaluation book, I have a chapter on what I call skin in the game. And skin in the game is basically arguing that evaluation and evaluators do not have to pretend to be neutral about the issues of the day. Who wants an evaluator who's neutral about poverty or hunger or sexual violence? These are issues on which we have a stake. And so what I've argued is that we all have a stake in the climate emergency. We all have a stake in issues of equity, and the association has adopted equity as a principle for our work. They haven't adopted sustainability, although the International Development Evaluation Association has, as has the Canadian Association. And the notion of how far dare evaluators go to change the world relates to our having skin in the game, meaning that we make clear what we bring to the work. I've been at this for 50 years, and from the beginning, I've always made it clear that I have a stake in the outcome of every evaluation. I care about whether or not it gets used. my whole career is based around utilization-focused evaluation. And so when I'm doing an evaluation, I tell my client, I write about evaluations. And so when I work with someone, I'm likely to write about the evaluation, and I need both good examples and bad examples. And we won't know until the end which one you are, but you will be an example of some kind in my work. And I have skin in the game, my reputation, but also the professional commitment and our profession's commitment to use is at stake in every evaluation. So the notion that we ought to somehow be pretending that we don't have a stake in evaluations is part of what gets called into question by this article, including the notion that Bob Stake presented that no two evaluations would be alike. From a research point of view, there's a lot of emphasis on replication, and the notion that if you're conducting research, who the researcher is shouldn't matter, because if they follow the methods the same way, they should be able to replicate a study. But where human beings are concerned, we know that's not the case. And so Bob proposed a principle that we understand that who an evaluator is, what they bring to the work, how they view the world, what they care about, will inevitably affect how they do their work and what results. And so no two evaluations would be the same, even if done on the same issues with the same methods, but by different evaluators, because in part we have skin in the game. One final example to illustrate what that means. The concern about having skin in the game is that it makes us potentially biased, or the critiques have come that if we get too close to programs or have a stake in the content of a program, that it will lead us to be easy on them, that we get in bed with our clients or get in bed with the program and therefore not do a good job of rendering independent judgment. My experience is just the opposite. Now, I have the luxury of being able to choose who I work with as an independent consultant. But when I'm working with people, it's because I believe in what they're doing, what their mission and goals are. The question is how to help them be effective in that. So I'm not neutral about their goals. For example, I've done a lot of work with HIV/AIDS programs. When I work with an HIV/AIDS program, I tell them, I come to this work and I care about it because my younger brother died of AIDS early in the epidemic, before there were antiretroviral drugs. I know about how AIDS can ravage families. And so I come to this giving them my best shot. I'm not cutting them any slack. If they're not doing a good job, I'm going to be all over them like a fly on fly paper, because what they're doing is significant and they need to be doing it well. So I want people to want me to give them my best shot, not to give them a soft pass. And when we get that clear, then I make it clear that I have skin in the game, they have skin in the game, and that's how far I go in trying to make the world a better place. Let me stop with that and see what has come up with you and for you. Can put questions in chat if you want, or and Linda can facilitate that perhaps, or you can come off mute and make a comment or ask a question.
Thank you so much. Just as Dr. Michael Quinn Patton mentioned, feel free to use the chat, unmute yourself if you have a question, and feel free to start the conversation.
I have a question. Thank you so much for your comments. I apologize for any background noise, but something that you said is reminding me of something I've been thinking about lately. I'm with Illinois Asthma Program. I'm an external evaluator, and the line between, I guess, getting into a program manager's territory with kind of micromanaging program activities and also doing a good job as an evaluator. Can you talk about that a little bit? You said you'd be on them like a fly on fly paper if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, but how do you balance that with letting a program manager do that as well?
It's a great comment. Thank you, Sarah. And a great deal of our work involves boundary management. And so negotiating the boundaries of whatever an evaluation is critical. A major issue for systems thinking is where to draw the boundaries around things. It's one of the major things that distinguishes how we understand the social construction of boundaries. So I think that evaluation of the kind I do, utilization-focused evaluation, developmental evaluation, principles-focused evaluation, participatory and collaborative evaluations, these are not just methods approaches. I treat evaluation as a relationship business. We're in the relationship business. We're in the people business. And so a part of negotiating boundaries is figuring out what the issues are. Sometimes the issues are in the details of implementation, that there are small things that aren't getting attended to that keep a program from being effective. And finding out what those small things are. It's not always the big things. It's not always that the theory of change is wrong. It's that they're executing poorly at a micro level. And so finding that out, helping them figure out what's going on in a program can sometimes get us involved in the details because folks can't see. I'll give you an example of what would appear to be a mundane thing. I don't think of it as micromanaging, but I was doing a evaluation of early childhood family education programs in Minnesota, especially in the rural areas. This was years ago when such programs were just beginning. Minnesota is one of the pioneers in making such programs general, not needs-based, but available to everyone. But some legislators were concerned about what kind of messages professionals were going to be giving parents that they were interfering with parental prerogatives. So we went out and observed some 30 programs, observed sessions, reported on what was going on, what they were doing, and as a group provided them with some cross communications. So I'm in a small rural community where a program takes place in a church basement that they use. And as I'm interviewing the program director, I said to her, so tell me about this space. And she said, well, it's a dedicated space. They have Sunday schools here on Sunday, but otherwise we have the space to ourselves. And I was about halfway through the observations at that point, and I said, well, your space is different than the other programs I've been to. And she looked around and said, different? I said, yeah, it's different. And then she suddenly looked at me and she said, oh my God, there's nothing on the walls. Now you would expect an early childhood family education program to have pictures of kids, of animals, of the alphabet. These walls were completely blank. And she jumped up from her desk and she had a bunch of kids' artwork on her desk and she began taping artwork all over the walls. I said, no, I'm not here to evaluate your walls. This isn't, I'm just noting, it's a little strange. And she said, oh, we established this parent committee 6 months ago to decorate the walls. And 2 mothers got into this cat fight about decorating the walls. And it got so nasty that we had to abandon the committee. And I, oh my God, there's nothing on the walls. And she's running around pasting children's art on the walls. Well, that's a micro thing, but it's having somebody from the outside, she'd gotten used to it. It's a fish in water. And it's one of the values that we can bring sometimes is the little things, how people are welcomed, what's going on, the stuff that we no longer pay attention to and notice. But that's that's something to negotiate and be invited to help people think about what the level of engagement will be. I often find that it's little things like that that people find is the most valuable. The language that they happen to be using that they don't realize was appropriate at one point in time, but it's not appropriate anymore. How they refer to people. Our language has changed. The way we interact has changed. And so all those things can come up. But it's important to have that negotiated, I think, to have some mutual understanding about it and not to make it the whole thing, but to blend it a little bit, some micro, some macro. It's a combination. I saw a hand up and lost track of it because I'm not
Yes.
seeing the whole screen anymore. Linda, I'll let you decide.
Yes, I did see a hand up as well, Katie Butler. And it was shortly before I saw some questions in the chat. So Katie, if you still have a question or a comment, then please feel free to share. If not, we can go to
Good morning. Yeah, good afternoon. Hi, Michael. You actually addressed my question in your response to the previous one. So thank you for coming to the session today. It's nice to hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Michelle Mitchell asked, do you have any suggestions for managing a team of evaluators and getting the discussion of skin in the game started?
Great, good question. I actually have done a book on facilitating evaluation that came out last year and has a lot of work about working with teams and facilitating teams, facilitating work with clients. And a part of what comes up for me with that is beginning a process of team building by asking people, what brings you to the team? What do you care about? What are you going to contribute? One of the exercises I regularly do in training, even with people don't know each other. I do a lot of workshops for the Evaluators Institute, for AEA, for the International Program and Development Evaluation Training. And both, whether it's virtual these days or in person, the first exercise I usually do is to break people into small groups and tell them, groups of 4 or 5, you are a team. And so what you have to do is introduce yourselves to your other team members and identify what knowledge, skill, capabilities you are going to bring to the team. And we'll set up a scenario, what kind of evaluation, depending on what the training is. If it's a developmental evaluation, I'll say you're going to be bidding on a developmental evaluation contract. So find out what each of you would bring to that, and then give yourself a team name and explain what you care about, what's your skin in the game individually, and what's your skin in the game as a team. So it's an icebreaker, but it's also a way for people to go deeper about what they care about, to do team building. And then we'll monitor that along the way and do some norming about how the team's going to operate, what they've seen with teams that don't work, what they've seen are the factors that help teams work, do some lessons learned, some community of practice, and strengthen the team.
Thank you. Okay, so our next comment on chat is, years ago, folks were fighting about quant versus qual, and you have brought to light the platinum standard, matching the research question and the method instead of RCT being the gold standard. Can you talk about advancements in qual and qualitative research, obviously, being accepted as a method that can help answer research and evaluation questions? Is there more work to be done to advance qual methods?
That's a great question. Our methods keep evolving. And yes, I was involved in the quantitative, qualitative debate for years. It has morphed from data measurement. We're pretty well agreed on the value of mixed methods these days, of combining things with qualitative and quantitative. What's still debated is attribution. So the gold standard issue, randomized controlled trials, is not about qualitative and quantitative. It's about how do you do attribution? And the issue of how do you determine if the result of a program can be attributed to that program. Um, the gold standard then debate is about attribution, not about measurement. I think that on the qualitative side, what's changing a great deal are the sources of qualitative data. Social media is basically qualitative data. The software programs that make it possible to manage large amounts of qualitative data. I'm this very week writing a synthesis report for the United Nations Food System Summit that's going to take place in September. Leading up to the summit, over the last 6 months, people have been holding dialogues about food systems issues around the world. All kinds of groups, university groups, community groups, civil society groups, nonprofits. And there's a format that they use, and they write a report of what their session was like. There have been 860 of those dialogues, and I have a team of people who is synthesizing the major themes out of those dialogues to inform the summit deliberations in September. And we're able to do that because of the software capabilities that there are these days, and because the storytelling, the nature of narrative, the importance of understanding both quantities and qualities of things, I think is more widespread. And even on the issue of attribution, I argue that I can have greater confidence in attributing the results of a program to the interventions of the program with detailed qualitative data than I can with an RCT. Because to the extent that the RCT is still an empty box design, we can infer the causality, but we don't know the actual mechanisms of the causality in an RCT without knowing the details of what went on. Qualitative data give us those details, and it's basically connecting the dots. It's seeing which line of evidence leads to the most likely result, the preponderance of evidence. And that's a story. Attribution is a storyline. And qualitative data does a better job of that than abstract RCTs, in my judgment. And when people have seen good examples of both kinds of data, they tend to agree. So, by the way, I was in Rome 2 weeks ago, the first international travel, the first travel I've done in 2 years, for the pre-summit conference with the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program, and the International Agriculture Research Institute were hosting. There were 400 of us there. And FAO is right near the Rome Coliseum. When I arrived, I had a day to adjust to the time lag. And so I went on a guided tour of the Coliseum in Rome. And at one point, the guide stopped before one of the large statues of a former Roman senator. And she said that in Roman times, when a dignitary or a senator wanted to leave their legacy, they had a sculpture done. And they had two choices for who would do the sculpture. If they wanted a realistic portrait of what they actually looked like, they chose a Roman sculptor. If they wanted an idealized version of what they wanted to look like, they chose a Greek sculptor. So the issue of reality versus illusion and how that gets reported has been with us for a long time.
Thank you so much. I have 2 more questions and you're off the hook after this. One question is, how do you suggest us navigating, discussing how we have skin in the game to community members? They are real subject matter experts, and I want to make sure that I'm coming in without imposing a power dynamic. And this is from a person from the New Mexico Department of Health.
Well, another great question. And so how we relate to people around evaluation, the baggage of evaluation, the fear of evaluation. A beginning point is to recognize that everybody's an evaluator. it's in our DNA, it's in our brains. It's what we do. People evaluate. What we as a profession have done is make it more systematic, is make the procedures and the ways of making sense of data explicit. And so when I go in to meet with community members, it's another issue of deciding what my role is going to be, who's sponsoring my being there, what it is they're trying to accomplish, and how we build a relationship there. And so it begins by how you learn things about them and how you share things about yourself. So in some communities, I am in the role of a novice. I don't know anything about their community. I'm asking them to teach me about their community. And I have to identify who I am and how I am. And so I have stories that I will share with folks to help break the ice about my identity and my role. One of the stories some of you may have heard me tell is that I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Burkina Faso in the 1960s during the Vietnam War years, when that country was still called Upper Volta or La Haute Volta, a former French colony. I worked with the Gorma people, about 500,000 people on the border between Burkina Faso and Niger, where the French drew a line right in the middle of their territory and separated them across national lines. Subsistence agriculture folks. And in the villages I worked in that part of the very remote bush in Burkina Faso, I was the first white person who had been in a lot of those villages. The word Gorma in the Gormanche language means human being. And so the French called them what they called themselves, the Gorma people. That meant they were the human beings. What they called me was Bon Piano, which translates as white thing. And so we got the status hierarchy very clear very quickly. So in 1999, I had the opportunity to help launch the African Evaluation Association. And I was hoping that there would be representatives from Burkina there, although the Gorma are one of the smaller of 46 tribal groups in Burkina. But sure enough, there were two mostly the dominant tribal group in Burkina, and one from Fadne Gorma, the land of the Gorma. I sought him out. We had a lunch at the UN compound outside of Nairobi. I caught up on the news. The road between Ouagadougou and Niamey, between the two capitals, had been paved. It was a dirt road when I was there. All the international agencies were now in Burkina. None of them were there at the time I was there. There'd been a couple of coups d'etats that I knew about but didn't know the details of. And then as we were talking, I said to him, so when I was there, I was called Bon Piano. And I wonder if I went back today thinking a certain, shall we say, political correctness had reached the bush, if I would still be called Bon Piano. And he said to me, no, we wouldn't call you Bon Piano now. I said, so what would I be called? He said, Juan Piano. I'd been away from the language a long time. I said, Juan Piano? He said, yeah, old white thing. I tell that story with community groups to acknowledge that I'm an old white man. And that I bring the biases and the experiences of that to whatever that I'm doing. And that I'm acknowledging the limitations of my perspective and wanting to engage with them and learn about their perspectives, and that we can share our ways of engaging together. So I have different stories that I use for different groups, but it's a way of acknowledging their expertise around their own community, my role and persona, and beginning a discussion about how we're going to work together.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that story. That was the first time I've heard it. One last question. And the question is, your example of implementing Blue Marble evaluation seemed to work well as an external contractor for a foundation. Have you had discussions or experiences with internal evaluators, for example, a low-tiered researcher of a large governmental institution, who could very well compromise their job security by challenging the values of the institution? If so, what kinds of advice or insights do you have other than finding a new job or hosting brown bag lunches?
Great question. I do have the luxury of being on the outside and having a lot of work opportunities, although that certainly wasn't the case earlier in my career. So I do a lot of coaching, actually, of people in that situation. A lot of my work these days involves coaching new and emergent evaluators. I had a call over the weekend from an evaluator in Europe, struggling with the power dynamics in an organization, an internal evaluator, and caught in a values conflict, and asking me to think through it with her. And so a part of this is that usually if you've gone to work for an organization, a foundation, an international agency, a domestic agency, their overall mission and values are something that you believe in. Hopefully you're not in the job just for the money, but you have taken the job because you hope to make a difference in bringing evaluation to that mission. And so you can actually become a proponent for mission and values and the adaptation of them to changing circumstances, and how you connect your own things you care about to whatever the organization cares about. And then what I suggest that people do is to look for allies who have some of the same concerns that you do. Don't engage in this work as just an individual, but look for allies, one of within the organization and indeed outside. There's a great Leonard Cohen song that I very much like called Anthem that has the line in it, look for the cracks are where the light gets through. Look for the places in the organization where you can see the light and potentially open that up by finding other people who share your concerns, by watching for opportunities to help make the organization better. Pick your fights carefully with allies. And one of the things you can do is find allies to the outside to support. That's what our evaluation associations are about, whether it's the Atlanta Evaluation Association, the state associations, the topical interest groups, international associations. I do a training workshop on consulting, and I regularly have, as a part of that, people make their elevator speech about how they introduce themselves as an evaluator. And I've done this for years. I've done it with hundreds of people. And everybody in their initial elevator speech talks about their methodological expertise, their subject matter expertise, their experience. They talk about themselves. I've never had a person in their initial elevator speech introduce themselves as part of an evaluation community. I have the privilege and honor of being well known within evaluation, but I'm not known at all outside of evaluation. I'm not known by community groups that I go to work or organizations that I go to work with. I wasn't known in Rome by the participants there from around the world. And so when I introduce myself as, good to meet you, I'm Michael Quinn Patton. I'm an evaluator, part of a global evaluation community of some 50,000 people who are working to make the world a better place through evaluation. And through that network, the Blue Marble Evaluation Global Network, we can do any kind of evaluation on any kind of issue. We support each other. We have principles, we have values, we have workshops, we have training, we have conferences, we have ways of taking on any issues that arise. And so I say to you, you're not alone. Look for support, find support, people to engage with. We are an evaluation community. I have written just written an AEA 365 blog, the blog that AEA has for Labor Day, for years now, I've been doing the AEA blogs on Memorial Day and on Labor Day. And my AEA blog this time, watch for it. Those of you who, and if you aren't subscribed to that service, subscribe. You get a daily blog if you don't have enough email. There's good stuff in there. A lot of people reflecting on it. Atlanta has taken a whole week for many years of doing blogs. My blog for Labor Day is about evaluators as essential workers. What makes evaluation essential workers? This has been the year of essential workers. In President Biden and Vice President Harris's inauguration celebration, Tom Hanks at the Lincoln Memorial paid tribute to essential workers, emergency medical volunteers, the first responders, the healthcare workers, teachers, grocery store operators, long list of essential workers. Somehow evaluators weren't on that list. I think we are essential workers in this time, helping to figure out what works and doesn't work, including in the COVID interventions. And so have a look, watch for it on, it's around Labor Day, my blog on We Are Essential Workers. We are essential workers as a community of people who support each other. And when you're finding yourself isolated, reach out to other people, connect, talk about the issues, support each other. We have important work to do.
Thank you so much. We sincerely appreciate your time, and we thank you so much. We all thank you so much, Michael Quinn Patton, for being here and for answering our questions. That is it for our AAEA Journal Club. Feel free to join us again next month. And Chris, I don't know if you have the journal article for next month. If so, can you please share it with us?
Not quite yet.
All right. Well, thank you. On behalf of AAEA, we thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next month.